Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours Saturday. It's great to have you here. If you're joining us on YouTube and want to find out more about what we do, just head to officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion around media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on today. It's a whole nother hour of Q&A, so fire up Makana, get those questions into us, vote the others up and down, and chat with the other producers. If you're not yet in Makana, never fear, there's askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, the easiest way, 24/7 to get those questions off the top of your head and in front of this illustrious panel to be answered. You can also get there by going to the QR code right over there on the screen. And again, askofficehours.global. But let's get this party started. TJ, start us off.
Douglas Carmichael asks, for those that use glasses, how do you find anything that helps reduce eye strain for long work days? I know Guy used tinted glasses.
Harshid?
I have in the past used blue blocker glasses, and what it is there's like a melanin filter in between the lens itself, because all usually makes these lenses that I know of. And I have personally found that it does help with the eye strain with bright screens and whatnot, so you might give that a shot.
TJ?
I wear an Apple Watch, and every hour this thing tells me that I should stand up. So I actually use that as an opportunity to stand up, walk away from my computer, focus on something else for a while, just a minute or two, walk into the kitchen or do something, and then, come back to my desk.
Jeff?
And for those of us that are thinking a little further outside the box, LASIK, it works great for me. I've been 10 years into it, and I don't have that problem anymore.
Mitchell?
A lot of people have reading glasses that they use on a computer, and that's not really an appropriate distance. If you think of reading glasses, it's going to be a little closer. Computers are usually about 2 to 2.5 feet away. So make sure you have glasses made specifically for computer screens. And the other thing is I've got a big window here, and like has previously been said, every once in a while it's good to look at a distant object to let your eyes react to the distance.
Courtney?
Yeah, I had my interocular lenses set for monovision, so I've got new lenses. I got Bausch and Lombs in here, baby, and I had them set 20/20 20/30, so that gives me a deeper, more of a range of distance, which I find works quite well. The problem with magnifying glasses, if you're using type of glasses to see your screen, is usually they correct your vision for close vision, but at a specific distance for both eyes. And if it's set for a specific distance for both eyes, you find yourself having to move your head to get everything in focus, and sometimes that causes a lot of strain on the neck. With the monovision, where you have one set a little bit further and the other one set a little bit closer, then it doesn't matter. Your brain just switches eyes. If the screen is a little further away, it switches left eye, a little closer, it switches right eye, and it doesn't cause you to have to get your head to exactly the right position to get the screen in focus if you're wearing readers of any type, I find.
Jeff?
Coming back to what Mitchell said, and also exactly what Courtney said, that's how my eyes are adjusted. Whenever I went to like three, I got the best of three opinions. The first one was, oh yeah, you'll be fine. You just have to wear readers in a couple of years. I'm like, I'm going to spend how much for LASIK? It's like that time was about $4,500. And then I'm going to have to go right back into glasses. Like, no, thank you. So I went to another and finally ended up at the right place at Mann in Houston. And he does like all these A-list people and NBA and NFL and such. But what he suggested was like, well, exactly what Courtney's saying is we need to do one eye here and the other eye over here. And then that allowed your brain to figure out which one is dominant at that point in time. I thought he was nuts. I gave it a try. He was like, okay, look, if you don't like it, then we can fix it so they're both the same. The first thing they did, though, is they're like, read this. Show me how you can read that. And they gave it to me right here. I'm like, I'll never read anything right there. I need it to be 3 feet away. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, I work on computers all day long. I need it to be 3 feet away. And that's where my perfect vision is 3 feet away. And it was supposed to last 4 or 5 years. It's lasted 10. Wow. So you have to talk to them about your situation. Don't let them bully you through. It's like, oh, you just read your phone right here. It's not the case, or a book or whatever.
Ronnie? I can't hear you, Ronnie.
So all the above, and in addition, There has been some tests. We've done some tests using a filter on the displays itself, because I think this is regarding sitting in front of a display all day. And if you're sitting in the studio like we are doing now, you can also try to adjust the general temperature of both camera and lights so that you can have a kind of ease doing that.
Nigel?
Well, you can go all the way, which is what I did, which is effectively had cataract surgery and replace your lenses with modern toric lenses. If you do it, you can do it without cataracts, but if you get typical cataracts, they put fairly low-level glass in your or plastic, and you're going to need to still wear glasses. But if you upgrade yourself all the way to the torics, then you get great vision, except at night when sometimes you see concentric circles of lights. But that I went all of that way, and that was a great experience.
And thank you, Bionic Nigel. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. My Sony A7CR has a queue of 10 slots for face memory and focus priority. Are there any PTZ cameras that have a similar ability for auto-tracking to follow and focus upon executives?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
I don't know of anyone that does this. And to be frank, I've never used that function on the cameras that have this ability. I feel that the Sony cameras have an amazing focus tracking ability. But of course, when you're starting to use this for PT sets, you need to be able to probably think of any type of object tracking things. But if I'm going to track one person instead of another, I don't think I'm going to do that.
Jeff?
Done this a lot. The Sonys FR-7s are probably the best at the same similar. I'm not sure if it's exactly as the A7, but it's pretty close. It is fairly accurate for autofocus. Now, as far as tracking, I take that externally. So that's using Mark Roberts motion control. It's a separate system that runs. It doesn't matter what, pretty much any PTZ out there they work with now. And especially on the higher end PTZs, it looks phenomenal. I use it on our UE150s. I've used it on the FR-7s also at the Sage studio that Blue Melody runs. They have the FR-7s in one studio and then the UE150s in the other. And they barely ever have to touch the cameras because it's auto tracking the whole time. Now, that's a very particular need. I use it in sports myself and have used it since the beginning in sports. It's more challenging in that, without a doubt. If you have multiple people on a stage, it's definitely challenging, but it can be worked through. But the biggest thing is whenever it's a single person on a stage, it works phenomenal. But it's a separate system that's doing the processing. I can say from experience, the PTZs that build in the CV engine, so the computer vision engine that nearly everybody licenses and uses, they will not work. Not like a separate standalone system that you can tweak and build. The other one to look at besides Mark Roberts motion control is Sear Vision. Both of those are at the top of the top. The reason I went with Mark Roberts is because I already had several thousands of dollars with them. So I stayed in their camp, but Sear Vision was first on my list for what they could do, because you could actually go in and point and go, I want that person to be followed, and it would just stay on that person. Even if they went off stage, it would reset to a wide shot, waiting for that person. When that person came back on with the exact same bone structure, and then they added facial recognition also, it would sink in and go to that person at whatever framing you pick it at. But yeah, you get what you pay for is 100% what it.
Alex?
Jeff, what is the cost for the Mark Roberts control software?
It starts out, believe it or not, it's honestly, it's almost a steal at $3,500.
Right. And is that just per camera, or is it?
It's $3,500. I'm sorry, back that up. I think it's $2,500 for one camera, and that runs on a laptop. Say it has to be a beefy computer. It needs to be a PC. It needs to have a good because it does use a GPU.
Yep.
So it needs to be a fairly beefy computer, gaming computer type thing.
And you're feeding the video into the computer. The computer then talking directly to the camera via
the Mark Roberts server. Yeah. So the way the path works is it goes, and this is why they're different. Is they don't talk. The software doesn't talk directly to the the tracking software. It doesn't talk directly to the camera.
Right.
Everything talks to a server of theirs. Their server then talks to the camera. And so that's why our offsite stuff works so well, is because we're talking to a server on site. We're not actually talking directly to the camera and the latency involved with that. But with Mark Roberts, they're bigger systems. You're probably looking at about $20,000 if you're buying their server and have all the bells. Like ours were about $20,000. And it's a very beefy, big Dell server with three quadro cards in it. So that,
but you need that server to make the per camera thing work, right?
Well, that server could do 12 cameras also. So it's a whole nother level. But that's going in baseband or NDI. And it'll even take RTMP, but that's useless. But baseband or NDI. We use it in NDI, of course, in our workflows, and it works fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Next question.
Paul Walhus from Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, Amazon discontinued the ability to get a record of all your transactions in CSV, etc. So how would you use AI or data scraping to extract a couple of decades of your order history?
Courtney?
Paul, I never even knew that you could get a CSV of all your orders. That would be wonderfully handy so I could cross-compare it to my credit card to figure out what all those nameless credit charges are to Amazon on my credit card are, so I could classify them and organize them for tax purposes. Now that it's gone, what I have to do is find out. I just bring up my orders and list, set it to all orders, and unfortunately, it shows you a picture of the item when you bought it, et cetera, et cetera. It's very graphics oriented currently, and it's multi-page. Divides it up into little chunks. For page viewing, and you have to go next page, next page, next page to go back in time in chronological order. So I don't know how AI would be able to handle that paging routine to be able to scrape all your orders off of the current display that you can get on Amazon. If somebody finds out, let us know.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I bought the same thing twice on Amazon because I didn't do enough research to determine, you already bought this book or this piece of a gear or usually an adapter of some kind. So I would find that very convenient to be able to say, did I buy this?
And there is a Chrome extension called Amazon Order History Reporter that I've had middling success with. I do a lot of Amazon purchasing for work, so being able to see it in a spreadsheet is important. Going forward, I would suggest, even if you don't have a formal business, just switch to an Amazon business account. There's no charge for it, but it does turn on things like being able to add different members to the same Amazon account and some pretty robust order reporting in terms of getting things out to Excel and CSV. Next question.
Craig Godoki from Toronto, Canada. My local big box hardware store has the Eufy tags that work with Apple Find My on sale. Has anyone tried these or other AirTag alternatives, and how is your mileage?
John?
I have two tangential thoughts on this because I just used Find My for the first time. Just an hour ago, I lost my AirPod Pros, and then you do the beep, but the beep didn't even get me close to where they were at until I did the thing where it tells you how far away you are. That is fantastic, and I hope the Eufy stuff works. Using that, I found out that they were in a drawer in the bottom of my desk that my maid put them into. It was fantastic. The other interesting thing about Big Box, doing my shopping for my UPSs here in Vegas, since Fry's is closed, Best Buy, Office Depot, all these stores now are starting to stock more computer-related items.
Alex?
Yeah, the Eufy could work well. If you're a Mac user or Apple user, I'd be hesitant to probably vary from it. And this is what they're very worried about is for Eufy or Tile, is that it is so convenient and is so built into all of your devices to use the AirTags that I would think really hard. If you're using, obviously if you're using other platforms, it makes a lot of sense to use something that is, obviously AirTags aren't going to work. But if you're on an Apple platform and you have an Apple Watch and a phone and some computers, wow. And John just used it for the first time. I use it all the time. I'm afraid I lose my keys way too often. I set them down somewhere. I'm like, they're around or my wife will move them or something. And I just, I don't know what I do without that AirTag on those keys, but we put them on the cat. so we know where the cat is. So so there's, But, it's incredible. Like, we kind of always know where, I also know, I know where all the cars are. I know where we put them in all our cases. And so it's funny when we hand them off to like Rocket or something like that, you can just see this little group of cases going down the 5, to LA or going to wherever they're going to go. And when we sent it via FedEx couldn't find one of our cases. We're like, oh, no, it's in the northeast part of your building at LAX. Like I can, and I could tell them within like 15 feet of where that case was. So they're really, I would recommend any kind of tracker, but if you're on the Apple platform, I would probably just stick with the AirTags.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I totally agree. We used to use different types of tracking gadgets, and when we started using AirTags, everything went smooth, except for the situation where you forget to put the AirTag into the case where you are flying with a very expensive sound mixer and it gets lost. That is not a good thing to happen. So make sure you have enough. Either way, you need to have lots of them.
Jeff?
I'll echo exactly what Alex said. We're putting them in everything. And it's not so much a theft deterrent. It's I would say guarantee, because it still doesn't happen guaranteed that they're going to deliver it. But I feel better that I know where it might be, instead of just being, oh, well, the tracking says it was picked up. And what's the second part of the tracking? Oh, well, it's still in progress. I'm like, but where is it? We don't know that, but we'll look for it. I had an $8,000 controller that UPS just didn't deliver. And I fought with them for 2 months. And finally they were like, well, I'm sorry, we don't know where it is. A month later, Mark Roberts called me and goes, hey, we ended up with this, and it's got your serial number and your name on it. It literally had my name on it. And they're like, do you want it back? Or did you ship it to us? It's like, no, I didn't ship it to you. I've been missing it for 3 months. So if I had an AirTag in that one, which I did in the other one, if I had an AirTag in that one, I would have been able to find out exactly where it was. Highly recommend AirTags.
And it's worth noting that Apple has opened up the Find My network to third-party devices. So the Eufy that was part of this question, as well as some other ones that are like a credit card form factor so that it fits more slimly in a wallet, do work in the Find My app. So it's more of you're not really getting a cost savings with the Eufy, but it's got water resistance, and some of them have a carabiner built in. So you get most of the functionality of the AirTag without having to leave the Find My network. And really all of these trackers are only as strong as the network, right? Tile was limited to only Tile users. The Find My network is anybody with an iPhone. So just keep that in mind. If it says work with Find My, you're not going to get a third-party app. You're actually using the Find My app to make that happen. Next question.
Chester Sweeney from Las Vegas, Nevada, via the QR code. What are the colors to avoid for those sensitive to it during FaceTime or Zoom call type things?
Mitchell?
Yeah, blue is a bad color, especially since it contains a lot of short wave ultraviolet light. And if you stare at that too long, it's going to mess your eyes up. Some people wear glasses to counteract that. You can see them with a little bit of a yellow tint on the glasses. I think Guy Cochran has a set of those glasses. They look very fashionable on him, and they're also blocking some of that damaging ultraviolet light. If you're spending a lot of time, and it's gotten a little bit better, monitors are being made to be less blue, I guess is the best term to use. Not like the old CRTs that we used to stare in all day, like looking into a carbon arc. It's not good for you.
Courtney?
Yeah, it depends on everyone's vision is a bit different. There are a lot of colorblind people, a large number, a lot more than people realize, who see colors differently. Red is sometimes a color to avoid, as Alex will tell you, because it focuses slightly differently than the other colors, said the guy wearing the red shirt, red checked shirt. But so you might want to avoid those. If you're a darker complected person or a person of color, stay away from bright white clothing, because the auto gain on these little CCD cameras will try and average the exposure out, and your face will get even darker, and you'll be able to see a lot less detail on it. So wear clothing that is an equivalent gray level to your the reflectivity of your face. You get out the old meter and meter your clothes against your face, and you'll come out much smoother.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I mean, red is the one that really breaks up a little bit. I mean, I think that blue light or those kinds of things. I mean, the color. Obviously, I'm wearing blue. Blue isn't really a problem for the color in front of the camera. It's blue light that's coming off of the monitors. But red. I mean, generally saturated colors don't compress as well, so it's a little less than sensitivity. But red tends to be more problematic. The other ones for shooting that we avoid are white and black, just because they create challenges in exposure. Black is okay. White is really hard from exposure, but we spend less time thinking about what people are sensitive to and more time thinking about what the cameras want to do. So, yeah.
Next question.
From Scott Hancock in Tokyo. Scott asks, following on a recent answer, is there any way to have the peace of mind of hardware encoding for Zoom, especially for webinar?
Nigel?
Yeah, I'm sort of minor detour. I probably should have gone at the end of this. This morning I'm on the latest version of Zoom. It's now correcting for the crush blacks, and my picture was all over the place. I no longer know how to use the scopes to correct it. So instead of using directly from the Blackmagic, I've actually sent it through Video Pencil. I guess you could use OBS or something. Now at least I can adjust my scopes to make my picture look right. So there's a whole bunch of changes in the latest version of Zoom, which I think is, I'm sure is great, but is going to induce some confusion.
Jeff?
Just a comment. Nigel, your audio video sync looks off to me. Could be my system also, but I'm using a Magewell. And that's what I suggest for interfacing for simple, easy, plug it in. It works off of UVC, meaning that it's very universal. You just plug it in by USB 3. I'm on one right now, and it's just taking my SDI, or in this case, actually, no, this one's actually HDMI, and then going into the Zoom, and it always works. And I highly suggest that if all you need is just a single channel into Zoom for whatever reason to be stable, then the Magewell decoders or encoders work great.
Alex?
And is that Magewell standalone, or is it still going to a PC?
It has to go into a PC, yes.
Well, I think the reason I ask is that I think that what he's asking is there a way to have a piece of hardware that's just encoding into Zoom, like that's just like a piece of hardware that just attaches to Zoom, and I don't think that there is.
I don't think
so. I don't.
Exist. Not like WebEx.
No.
Yeah. Not
I
like
just
WebEx.
It's not like a Polycom. Has Polycom and Cisco and have these kind of low end routers. I think that probably makes sense. I don't think that there's anything right now that's out there that's just like a little head end that would do that. To make that happen. I will say that I'm sure that Jeff is talking about a very stable solution on the PC, and I mean we use Mac Minis and stuff like that, and with all kinds of encoding, whether it's an ATEM Mini or it's some of the DeckLink cards, and they're super stable. What makes computers stable is using them to do one thing. So if you want it to act like an appliance, treat it like an appliance, and you'll find that it works pretty well because most of your appliances are software too.
Next question.
Carlos in London via the QR code asks, I really miss getting the shows via the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts. Any chance of a return to help my winter commutes? I'd be willing to pay a subscription fee, and I suspect I am not alone.
Alex?
We hear you. Working on it. Stay tuned.
Next question.
From James Wilson in Palo Alto, California. Does anyone have experience with or opinions on the RCT FR-1? I am interested in pairing it or equivalent with the Sony FR-7s to get closer to manned camera movements.
Go ahead, Samuel.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting concept. I don't have specific experience with this one here, but what it essentially is like a sensor that you put on top of a fluid headed tripod, and you can move it, and then you move the camera. But it doesn't look like it's on sale in any of the major stores, so I'm kind of skeptical to it. You don't find a price on it standalone that I found. But
Nope. Sorry. Go ahead.
Just alternative. I've done this on a low end scale. What I've done, I've got a DJI RS2, and I have the phone on top of it and use it as a gyroscope. And when you can pan, turn down the sensitivity and pan the camera, and it actually works very good for motion. I've had some issues with the reliability, like the signal is Bluetooth, so it's nothing you would want to use in high-end production. But as far as panning it, it works very well. So I like the concept, but I'm kind of skeptical to the product so far.
Jeff?
Skeptical, definitely, of that unit. Depending on how they're doing it. Okay, so I've been doing this for years, and with the Mark Roberts system that we have, it's called the pan bar setup. It uses an encoder it's actually two encoders in the tripod. It's a cartoni head, and that cartoni head by itself is like $15,000 to give you an idea of what it takes to really work. And so that means that every pan movement you made, every tilt movement that you make, it comes out a data port on that head. That head then feeds into the Mark Roberts system, which then translates it into their mimic side, which then mimics what you're doing into whatever pan tilt head or pan tilt zoom camera, a PTZ camera that you're using. I've tried to use that pan head with the FR-7s. I've tried to use it with the UE-150s. It sort of works, but it's not great. With the Mark Roberts heads, which are about $14,000, $15,000 US each, it works phenomenally well. And literally, you can feel like you're driving a camera. As a matter of fact, that's what we use it for, is to put a camera in places that we can't people can't put a person. And now with the next head that we're about to invest in, the PTA2, it allows us to put a big box lens behind or in front of a big camera, a regular broadcast camera. So it's not a PTZ, but its ability is to put it in places that you can't put a full rig, but you can still remotely control it like it should be a camera, way a camera should look.
Alex?
Yeah, there's another way to do that, which is that we've been using this, and it's much lower cost. It takes a little bit of setup. There's a lot of software for it, and I'm not sure who's doing it for controller to camera. We do it controller to CG camera, and this is basically what happens is you have your camera up, you have your control up here, your monitor, and you have your handles, and you have a little camera out here, and it shoots at targets that are out here. So it sees a bunch of basically they look like little QR codes that are sitting out there. And what it can see, now sometimes we put them all across the ceiling so that we can do free-forming, just walking around. And sometimes we do them, on a specific area here, like usually, it's not usually a plane, it's usually a square because it creates more parallax. Anyway, what happens is that because it's doing pixel tracking, it takes a lot of CPU, GPU, or it's gotten much easier. But in the early days, we started using these maybe 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago. And so what it does is it can track those. And because this angle is tracking what it's actually seeing, we found that it was actually more accurate than the encoders, because it is the further away that thing is, and with things that are closer and further apart, it actually can understand what's actually happening, and very, very small motions work better than the encoders. It is more setup, because the problem is you need a little volume to do it in. It's not like I can just have an encoder there. So you do have to put it there. But we've used those where it's interesting to see what we're doing here with, and the other way to do this, by the way, is we have done it with a variety of the HTC trackers. So we take the HTC trackers, we've literally connected them, take your little handle that you would use in an HTC VR Vive, and we've hooked it to the top of the camera, and then put the trackers out there, and it works remarkably well as far as being able to understand exactly what that camera's doing. And we've done that for both handheld as well as, and we've done it also with Oculus. Handheld, those work great. I mean, they spent millions of dollars to make sure that it tracked to the pixel. And so those work well. What's really going to be interesting, controlling PTZs is really interesting, but wait until we start having camera operators, like real camera operators, used in esports. The problem we have right now is that almost all the cameras that you see in esports are done with little mice, because they come from esports people who think that's the way to do that. And there are already people doing this. And when they use these remote controls where you see a screen and you're using a real camera with a real camera operator covering esports, you can feel it. Like you can tell which camera they're cutting to, because they'll have a bunch of people with mice and they'll have the person with the camera, and suddenly it's these big moves and it looks great, and it just looks like you're watching football, not like you're watching a game, and like a game. So watch that space, because it's going to become a lot bigger over the next couple of years. It's already being done in some esports, but it's not being done across the board. And you're going to see. My prediction is within 5 years, everyone will be doing that, because it just makes a lot more sense. It just looks better, and you're taking real camera operators who understand what they're doing.
Jeff?
Back in the days when I worked with Major League Gaming, that was exactly it. I was like, why can't you make it look like a camera, guys? Look, you see how you're moving around? But it was because there weren't camera people. They didn't understand. They were thinking like a gamer. And so they were twitching and looking around. It's like, no, you need to make a nice, smooth move. It took a lot of training, but they were able to get it. But it depends on the game, too, whether it's a PC versus a game. Like Halo, for instance, was totally different because it was just joysticks. And so we could take a feed directly from them. But back to this thing about the tracking stuff, a little bit different than what Alex was saying, was more about motion tracking of the camera itself, not just shooting and having that the field of view adjustment is definitely something that makes a difference when you're doing VR and virtual production. So one of the things that in our system that it does do is it compensates whenever you're in a close-up. Your motion is less than if you're far, or vice versa. If you're far away and you move the pan bars back and forth, it compensates. So it knows your zoom length, it knows your focal length. So the whole system works together, and that's where I see the other competitors that have tried to do pan bars. That's where they fail, is because they don't actually have full control of everything the camera and the head is doing, and that's why it's hard to make a less expensive PTZ look like a more elaborate system, such as the Mark Roberts head and camera setup, is because they don't have all that data coming back. We're getting close. I mean, like the UE150 has 3D. That's a lot of data coming back to it, but it's not as specific as what you're doing if you're controlling it from a system.
Next question.
Peter Jonasson from Sweden wants to know, what kind of backup strategies for recorded media would you recommend while traveling or documentary with none or intermittent connections only?
Go ahead, TJ.
When I'm traveling, what I like to do is hopefully I'll bring enough of the little media cards that I use to record all my media on, and then I'll have a backup on a laptop that I bring with me, and then a backup on an external hard drive that I bring with me. And that way I have 3 copies of everything that I've shot. If I don't have enough media cards that I know ahead of time, I'll bring 2 external hard drives with 1 copy on the laptop, 1 copy on each external hard drive, and have one of them on me at all times.
Alex?
Yeah, usually, I'm not usually shooting by myself, so for documentary work, and so usually there's at least one other person, and so usually what we do is we take those copies that TJ's talking about, we make sure there's 2 hard drives, and we're keeping them in our respective hotel rooms, so that if one gets broken into, the chances of them, both of us getting broken into. So we, at the end of the day, we're copying that footage to both of those drives. When we can, we will try to not, like it depends on how much we're shooting. If we can keep the camera drives, without having to clear them, we will. Like a lot of times, if it's a shorter documentary shoot, we'll take enough storage that we can copy it to those 2 drives and still just keep all the cards with us so that we have 3 copies of it. When we also take the most important things and we try to upload them to the cloud. I know that oftentimes it's intermittent when we have connectivity, but we research where we might be able to get that connectivity. Number 1 place is Starbucks. You can have a very long coffee, and a lot of times we'll compress things down to something that is not as good as what we shot, but not a total disaster. And we'll upload those to the cloud so that we just have some other place that they exist to make those work. Inside of that model, we have never lost all the copies. So we have had people lose the copies. We have had things stolen. We have had bags stolen. We've had those things. But we've definitely, and if somebody's bag does get stolen, you copy them again right to you build up the system again, so that you have it immediately. You don't go, oh, well, we're going to see if we can get home. Once there's 1 copy of something, you go into kind of a low-end panic mode. Another thing that we've done in the past is we put them in and we put them in FedEx and send them home as we go. Like we find a FedEx place and we just get them out. We still have, that's a third copy, not the replacement for the 2 copies that we have, but that way they're out of the country, and so that helps as well, especially if your documentary is sensitive. so you often don't want to have all the footage on you or the only copy of that footage.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think TJ and Alex have covered most of the high points there. It depends on what type of shooting you're using. If you're using your phone that doesn't have removable memory or removable media, it can become a real problem. You might want to have to plug it in and download it and free up that area. If you're using a camera that uses CFast cards, which are more expensive than a new phone each time you plug one in, you may not be able to keep enough of them around, to avoid recycling them, erasing them, and recording over them. The price of these little these caddies that you can find on Amazon have gotten cheaper. This one is a very high speed one. This is Thunderbolt 4. Up to 40 gigabits, so a high-speed connection, but they do make one, if I can get it to work here, for $11 that is USB 3, 10 gigabits per second, and NVMe drives have become a commodity now, and so you can get them up to 8 terabyte. Most of these cases support up to 8 terabyte NVMe drives, and you can just buy some at good rates and cycle these through as your external hard drives to stick stuff onto. They're small and they're compact and they can fit inside your computer case. They're non-spinning drives, so you don't have to worry about dropping them and damaging them in that fashion. And they can slip into a pocket and you can easily lose them, so be careful about that.
Ronnie?
Yeah, and another thing you can do to save some footage is everything is getting stolen or you are being taken by authorities, is to just make an audio copy. That is much smaller files, and you can upload that to a safe place where you have just small or almost nothing of internet access, even using your phone to do that. So just to save the audio can also be a big thing.
And if you really can't get FedEx to ship your drives home and you do not have an internet connection, at the very least, put the master copies of the footage on separate flights home. So if the luggage gets lost or something happens.
By the way, that is a great point. We never fly home with one person with having all the, in the same flight. We never have those 2 people. Oftentimes what we do is we have, for an event, we have what we call a safety day. So there's 1 or 2 people that stay an extra day, just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, things have to be returned. Like when we buy the tickets, everyone's leaving on one day. Everybody else leave. There's like 1 or 2 people that leave 1 day later, so that if anything needs to be done, people aren't rushing to the airport. There's always someone to kind of clean that up. The best part of that is if nothing goes wrong and everything goes fine, you get a free day in Paris, so or Tokyo or London or Rome or whatever if you're and I was usually the safety person because I was allowed to define who that was. So anyway, so the so I've seen a lot of cities around the U.S. around the world from inside of that safety day.
Just a reminder, the show does run on your questions, so if you've got questions, hop into Makana, get them into us while you're in there. Don't forget to vote the other questions up and down so we can focus the show. And if you're not in Makana, you can go to askofficehours.global, or sometimes you see a QR code up on the screen that you can scan. That is the easiest way to get your questions in there, but we're going to keep on going. Next question.
John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania asks, is there an NDI router that is a bit more powerful than the free VizRT version and less expensive than Sienna?
Jeff?
Yes and no. It depends what you consider by more powerful. If you just need numbers of inputs, there's Rascular. If you need simplicity with a little bit more, maybe the indiastuff.uk from Zen. Martin's was one of the first people out with alternatives to the Sienna platform. That said, not just because I'm a Sienna user, there is a reason. It's a buy one, cry once. It's there. If you buy it, you own it, and it's yours for life. And so you just move it around. It's super stable, and it has capacity of 4,096 by 4,096. for not a lot of money compared to the same SDI router at 4096 by 4096. So if you could find one, but Zen's very inexpensive. I think they're limited though. What did I read? It's not near as large. So that's where I'm saying it depends on your capabilities. If you need to have hardware control of it and the ability to macro or do salvos, then you probably definitely want to look deep inside it. Hardware control is available on the Rascular side. I'll paste a couple of the links in the Meccano just so that you can kind of check them out. But I would also say definitely look upwards if you want to. Look upwards into if you want me to show you how ours is working in a couple different locations, just reach out to me directly. I'd be glad to help.
Next question.
Håkan Forss from Stockholm, Sweden wants to know, Jeff, could you tell us how you use the Sienna engine and why? Also interested to know what the cost is.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I can't speak publicly because of costs, but reasons. But I would be glad to discuss it with you offline. But as far as the reason of how we use it, we use it a lot of different ways. It's both for ingesting, it's for distribution, it's for think of that rack of gear that you have. Like if you're familiar in the broadcast world, the open gear concept where you have a card for every function or different functions and stuff. That is basically it. Is the processing engine is a rack full of the glue that helps a broadcast stay together. And that's how we use it. And so one day we may use it to bring in a bunch of, ingest a bunch of SRTs and flip them out to NDIs. And we may be stripping and moving audio around within that, de-embedding, embedding. We may have processors in it, creating multi-views. I mean, it literally is just a big processing rack. So that's how we use it. And, it's a broadcast tool. So let me put it that way. As far as the price, it's a broadcast tool. It's not cheap, but it's well worth the money if it fits your needs.
Next question.
From Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. I know some people on the panel use iStat menus on macOS. I haven't used it in years. However, I do have a license for version 6. I can see the value in the data in the menu bar, but does the app itself consume a lot of resources?
Jeff?
I use iStat menus. I am very fond of it. I feel like to cut to the chase, no, I don't think it uses a lot of resources. You can configure how much information iStat menus is going to give you. The stuff I use on mine is pretty light. I usually just want to see the network transfer more than anything. So that's about all I have. You can turn on a ton of feedback to try and see how quick fans are spinning and things like that. That would use more resources, but having said all that, turning on a bunch and opening up Activity Monitor on the Mac, it's still so far down the list of things that are using any kind of proper resources.
TJ?
Yeah, I have it enabled where darn near everything that can be monitored is monitored, and I opened up my Activity Monitor this morning on my Mac, and it's using 1 or 2%.
And the really amazing thing about iStat menus is when you're on these newer M processor Macs that have a ton of cores, you quickly identify which ones are the efficiency cores. Like if I had a nickel for every time I'm on my Mac Studio, it's got 20 cores, and I just see flatline on 18 of them, and then 2 of them are up at 100% because it's running all those low-level processes. But also when I'm the peace of mind of like when my Mac's feeling a little sluggish, and I can just go up to that CPU and click it and see what's hogging all the resources. I can man, I am never going to put this app on my computer, or I'm going to wait a year before I put it on here again because it's just causing me stability problems. I get that as part of SetApp, which is great because then I can, play with a bunch of different utilities. But I love iStat. John?
If I had a nickel for every time I love and use iStat menu, I'd have 97 cents.
Next question.
From Matt Cool in Montreal, Canada. Matt says, I saw this video of a model rocket builder who landed a model rocket like how SpaceX does it. Wondering if John and the Vegas crew are up for a new challenge.
Chief Rocketeer, Mr. Preto, go ahead.
So, sorry. I was so excited to answer this question. So remember when SpaceX first started, their first goal was to get to space. And then much, much later did they want to retrieve the boosters. Remember in amateur rocketry, we always recover our boosters. Whether they land standing up is another thing. So our goal as amateurs right now is to get into space, and that's our goal, is to get into space. And several teams have done it. About, I would say, half a dozen have got there, and 100,000 feet on the Kármán line. And every September, which is LDRS, and Chris Fenwick has been to that launch. We've got several teams that try for it every year. We've got a rocket there. One of our guys that's on our team has tried. He's got up over. His last rocket did like 80,000 feet. So we're really, really close. But landing the booster for amateur rocketry is not one of our goals and not a big deal. But it looked cool. And that guy spent a lot of time to make that happen.
Mitchell?
I thought John was going to say he's ready to do it because it takes some very serious calculations, I guess trigonometry, to make that happen. And the fact that an engine is up there flying around when it shuts down for the boost to apogee and then has to restart just makes it a dangerous projectile, doesn't it, John?
No, it comes down on parachute. Our boosters come down on parachute.
And then lands on its tail fin?
Yeah, well, no, they land, but they usually land, horizontally.
Okay, and then the reason I asked was SpaceX is a powered landing. They don't have a parachute, so that's a tricky maneuver.
Courtney?
Yeah, when you think about it for model rocketry, this is very, very difficult. The guy achieved it because model rocketry uses solid propellant that once you light it, it burns until it burns out. And of course, the SpaceX use liquid fuel, which they can control. They can turn a valve on. They can control, besides vectoring the thrust, which is also what this guy did with the model rocketry. So you had to have subservos to direct the engine to point in a certain direction, but getting it to stop at the right point so that you can land is difficult, and getting it to achieve the correct amount of thrust to counter the speed of gravity, to fire it at the right time and to have it stop at the right time with a solid rocket is hit or miss, I'd say, especially because those rocket engines aren't exactly very perfect in their in their ignition and burning out time.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsei from Tromsø, Norway wants to know, did Zoom modify the color processing for ATEM Mini switches to address the issue of crushed blacks?
Nigel?
Yes, as I said earlier, they've clearly done something because I'm on the latest version, 17.1, I think, of Zoom. I upgraded. And I get in every morning, I adjust my color using my Omniscope, and it was all strange. So today, I couldn't find my way through it. People were advising me on changing contrast and stuff, but it looked crazy to me, even though it looked good to them, and that's not a consistent way to go on. So I'm actually going through the video pencil, which is probably why Jeff is seeing a sync problem. So I'm going to have to work my way through that or find the setting to turn off the improvement that Zoom is making to my Blackmagic setup.
Mitchell?
Yeah, we don't know exactly how Zoom accomplishes this. We do know that Zoom is talking to the UVC protocol that's coming out of the ATEM and says, are you an ATEM? And if the ATEM says yes, then Zoom knows to apply this different LUT, I guess, for all intents and purposes.
It's
but
not.
There is some type of communication going on between the Zoom unit and the ATEM.
I'm just going to cut you off. It's not applying a LUT to the UVC. It is making some very specific requests to the ATEM. This is a very, very heavy math thing that they're doing. So it's not. I just want to make sure we don't get too caught off there. It's not a UVC. It's not like applying a LUT to the UVC, because that would be applying a LUT to an already compressed signal. It's making specific requests of the ATEM. It is not crushing the blacks. Are you, Nigel? Are you playing with the hue at all, or are you just, because you may find that to get to what you're looking for, the hue may be, because what the hue does is it takes your color and it rotates it along that thing. So if your skin is in one place, if you just grab that hue and you move that back and forth, what you're going to see inside of an Node Omniscope is you're going to see it just turning. It's not changing, it's just turning. So you'll just see in the scope, you'll just see it just turning around. And it's really actually pretty fun. One of the great things about the Blackmagic cameras, when you have that control, because of the controls you have in the ATEM, is you open up Node and you move each slider and just watch what it does to the color, because it'll squeeze it, extend it, it'll and do a lot of other things. But the one you're looking for, I think, is playing with a little bit of the hue to rotate it to where you want it, and a little bit of the saturation. You may want to pull back the saturation a little bit depending on what kind of LUT you have on there. But that may work better for you than some of the other, than grabbing onto the color wheels.
So, just so I understand it, is Zoom telling the ATEM to make the adjustment on the color?
It's asking for very specific things from the. I don't know how much I can get into that, but it's asking, but it's not applying a lot. I mean, we can all apply a lot to the UVC. That would be easy, and Zoom could have done that a year ago. This is doing some pretty high end interactions with. I don't know how much detail I get into, but it does a pretty high end interaction with the ATEM. So it's fixing a pretty deep problem there. So,
Courtney,
Alex, since I don't, let us know if you can't tell us this, but does it apply it to the HDMI output as well as the UVC output in the ATEM?
The HDMI isn't having that. The HDMI is not having the problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So an HDMI out of it is still just a video out. It's not doing anything to it. So,
next question.
Jeff Veely from Henderson, Texas, and via the QR code asks, since Ventura, I found stability issues with Create Network on a Mac. Does the panel have any suggestions? No, this option is very hidden in Sonoma.
Alex?
I haven't used Create. It was funny. I was trying to think about that. We haven't used Create Network. So typically, creating a network allows you to have the computer become a server that is providing a network to the rest of so you can basically. What we've done in the past is, for instance, and the more simple version of this would be share my Wi-Fi through my Ethernet, or but you can actually create a whole network with it. And I have to admit that Apple has been slowly deprecating that solution for years. But it is useful. Like, for instance, if you need to provide, like, one of the ways that we use these types of tools, and usually it's just a share, it's usually in the share menu, is I have obviously, I want to make my connection available over Wi-Fi, but you may want to say, I want to make my cellular connection available over Ethernet, that type of thing. And that's where you might use a create network. But I will say that I think that Apple has been slowly kind of pushing that out. It's gotten a whole bunch of security ramifications that I think Apple would like to extract themselves from. So anyway, I think that's so they're not turning it off, but they're making it harder and harder to find. I don't think there's a lot of engineering resources going there. So you may not. It's kind of a little bit of a kludge that a lot of us have used, and I think that I would probably find other ways to do that.
Man, that sharing setting has been in there forever, though. I remember back when it was still airport cards that you had to install into the computer, and I had DSL, but my grandparents had dial-up, and I was like, oh, I can get the dial-up to be Wi-Fi, and then I realized that was a terrible idea.
Well, and where we have used it, for instance, is like to get into our switchers and everything else, you have to get into a VPN, like in our office. And so, like Nate Hill would be cutting a show for us. Instead of sending him a Meraki box, he would use the VPN inside of his laptop and attach the switcher to the same network that was doing it, and then he's on, and he has the local IPs and everything else. So he'd have his control panel, which can't navigate that VPN, is being delivered to the VPN and then once we said we were going to do it all the time, we went and set a box. but as far as figuring it out the first time, that was the way we managed that.
Next question.
Håkan Forrest from Stockholm, Sweden asks, any thoughts of what we will get in NDI 6?
I see a hand raised. I can't see the hand. Sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
No, go ahead, Jeff. Jeff was going to.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Love and goodness. Lots of love and goodness. There's definitely a longer wait than we wanted, I guess you would say, because it was moving pretty fast for a while there. But higher bandwidth is one thing, being able to slide the scale. And also HDR 10-bit is probably one of the biggest things that we're all waiting for.
Alex, did you have anything? Sorry.
No.
Next question.
Via the QR code drop, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada says, now that Peter Gabriel and various other artists are bringing crowds towards Bandcamp, can Aurastream.com and other such places compete?
Nigel?
I think only time will tell with that. I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of shakeout. It's interesting, by the way, I saw the Peter Gabriel tour this year, probably the best. I saw a lot of tours this year. That may have been the best visually and audio-wise of all the ones I saw. But it was a complicated thing to hear the album before unless you were willing to get into the streaming mode. But I do think it plays the point that I know someone this week was trying to buy a copy so they could give Peter Gabriel the $15. I don't think Peter Gabriel, I'm sure he's grateful for your $15 or whatever it was. I think what he wants to do is to drive people to his concerts, which is where they make the money, and they're happy to take the streaming if they're a big enough artist. So I think there's going to continue to be a shakeout of this, but more and more, everything will be streamed.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that it is. I agree with Nigel. I think that Peter Gabriel did disconnect from his label a long time ago, 20, 25 years ago, and said, I'm going to do this on my own. And he definitely, reports have that he made a lot more money. Like with most artists that can self-publish and are well-known already, will tell you that they make far more money selling their own content than going through a record label. The hard part they have is that you have to have some business acumen or a team that's going to help you do that, because that's what the record company helps. Is it helps an artist who doesn't want to think about that promote themselves and get out there and manage sales and manage distribution. If you're willing to do that yourself, or you're someone like Peter Gabriel that people already know, you can do that on your own. You don't really need them. We're definitely at a point where the larger artists don't really need the record labels anymore. Like they may use them, and they may not want to shake the tree too hard. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but they don't really need them anymore, because there's so many avenues for them to go out in. But I do think that the bandcamp, other things like that, are going to be 1% of Peter Gabriel's sales. His even measured in revenue, I think he's going to make more money from the plays on Apple TV. By the way, the new album is amazing. Like, just it's a Peter Gabriel album. Like, it's not like an experiment. It just feels like I'm back to Peter Gabriel albums, and so really, really well done. And I've been listening to it for the last week. so it's really good.
Next question.
Jack Ruppel from Breckenridge, Colorado says, when do you think the iPhone 15 will be on the list of cameras supported for the Tilta Nano 2? Fully Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, 4K, 6K, 6K Pro, partially Sony FX3, A7S3, A7R5, ZV-E10, ZV-E10, and Canon R7.
Ronnie?
Okay, I have to order this nucleus. I have to test this. But I think it's not as much as Apple supporting it. I think the thing is that the camera app developers need to be supporting it. And as I read on the firmware updates from Tilta themselves, it already supports the Blackmagic camera app. So I think this is something Alex has been playing a little bit. I'm not sure what the results were, but I don't think it's up to the phone to decide, or the iOS version to decide this. I think it's the app developers that decide how to support this.
Mitchell?
I love Tilta. I have Tilta Cage on my FX3. The thing that I'm not sure about, and I sure would love some clarification on it, is that the Nano is a mechanical device with a geared system on it. So how does it engage a camera lens that isn't a zoom lens? Like on does it use like a moment lens or whatever that is that you can clip on the end there and allow it to be able to engage that? So being mechanical, how does it work with something that wasn't designed to be mechanical?
Alex?
Well, it's sending out a signal that would be the same as what it would send out to a mechanical lens. That still just the mechanical lens is just converting the motion to it. It's sending that signal the same it would send to a motor. I'm trying to get it to control. Let's see. It's still a little. I will say that I feel like it's a little funky. Like I can see it right now in my, so I've been kind of slowly putting this rig together. I don't think this is the final place it's going to end up, but it's got, I've got the Tilta on the top here, and it is, and I can see it in the lens control, but I can't quite get it to control the lens. And I know that Adrian has posted some stuff. So over the weekend, I'm going to try to get this working. If you ask on Monday, I'll probably have it working. I'm still fiddling with it a little bit, but this is this is a little mixture. This is the Tilta controller, but I'm using a small rig, for it. So playing
Alex,
with
can
it.
Can you pull the fizz off the top of it and have somebody else hold that and pull focus?
Yeah. This
that's
is just
cool.
This is just attached to it, but I can just hand it to somebody and have them work on the focus too. Yeah, so it's definitely not required.
Just a reminder, after the show today at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, we do have the new panelist meeting. So if you're interested in learning what it takes to be a panelist here on Office Hours, just be on the lookout in Discord for a link to the Zoom channel. But with that, we're going to head on up to the second hour. So we'll see you on the other side. And welcome back to the second hour of Office Hours Saturday. We've got a whole second hour of Q&A, like I said, so we're excited to answer your questions. Don't forget to go into Makana to get those questions in and vote the questions up and down so we can focus the show. Also, if you're not in Makana, you can head to askofficehours.global or shoot the QR code that pops up on the screen from time to time, and that is what is going to let you get your questions off the top of your head and in front of the panel for answering. But let's go ahead and get into the next question.
Via the QR code, Marielle Jusha Miera from Woblo wants to know, if you were flying into Los Angeles, what would you bring with you? What wouldn't you bring? What don't you need at all?
All right, go ahead, Ronnie.
Well, I've been doing this a few times, not too much, but one thing that I always tend to forget is sunscreen. California is a very sunny area, Los Angeles as well. And having sunscreen and good protection is really good, especially if you're going outside. Bringing too much camera equipment can also be an issue if you don't have a good explanation what you are doing with it. Don't ever try to inform the officials that you are going to work. Ask me how I know.
Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the great things about going into other countries right now is that the tools that we have all the way down to the iPhone are very capable. And so you can have something that looks like a consumer camera and it can shoot great footage. So you can really just be a tourist anywhere in the world now, but still have a fair amount of gear as long as you don't go too crazy. And that's what you rent locally. As far as what I take to LA, I go to LA pretty often. The main thing is that because I'm traveling, I'm on office hours. A lot of times I have one carry-on that's just my kit. This is what I'm doing. The bummer about that is I now have to actually go to baggage claim. So which I get another carry-on. I never take, when you say what you don't need, I never carry, unless I'm on a project that I have a bunch of cases, I will never carry more than I can pull. So I have usually two carry-ons, one carry-on for my that with my clothes and everything else, and another carry-on that has now you have to check one of them, but another carry-on that has my gear for jumping on office hours and so on and so forth. And then I have a Rush 24 backpack that has everything else in it. And those are the three things that I'll come down. I'll claim my bag and off I go. But I tend to like to keep it small. I can travel with a carry-on of clothes forever. Like I don't need to ever, because I wash my clothes in my hotel room. So I have clothes that are easy to wash when I'm moving around. So I'll usually have one kind of more formal one. I'll have a dress jacket and stuff like that if I need it. But I have usually kind of polyester kind of stuff that I travel in. It's easy to wash and easy to dry overnight. Without any machinery. And so everything I'm doing in between things at meetings and things, I'm wearing those clothes and then I switch up when I need to be in a meeting. So those are the kind of things that I also often carry a small, I know this sounds crazy, but I usually carry a small iron because a lot of the hotels have gotten into this thing like, oh, we don't have to have an iron. A steamer is not an iron. It's I just want to say, to all these hotel rooms, all these, little children hotel rooms, children hotels, that a steamer, I know it's cheaper for you to do it that way. And, there's less of X, Y, and Z. It is not an iron. So I have a little travel iron that I use to actually get things straight because things need to be straight when you're in a meeting. So anyway, those are some of the things that I think about.
Courtney?
Yeah, if you're going to try and find work, bring your talent agent with you. because they will help you find work. But more seriously, Los Angeles is quite temperate. Bring layers of clothing because it may start out a little chilly in the morning in the 40s, and by the afternoon it may get up to the high 60s or 70s or even higher, depending upon the time of year. So bring layers of clothing so that you can peel off an outer layer if you're getting a little too warm. If you're going to be working outdoors, bring a hat. As was mentioned earlier, sunscreen is handy to have because the sun is pretty relentless here. Rain gear, I wouldn't pack too much rain gear because it's your likelihood of getting, check the weather forecast before you come and see what the weather is going to be like. We usually have a pretty good warning before the rain comes down, but a lot of times it goes north of Los Angeles. Then they'll be predicting a big rainstorm, and San Francisco will get soaked, but just at San Luis Obispo, it all goes north and misses us completely. As far as equipment goes, you can rent about anything here in town. If you have a good credit card and good credit, you should be able to rent production equipment if that's what you're looking for on a daily basis here in town. So don't go too crazy in bringing a whole giant kit because it might be cheaper to rent than it would be to pay the extra luggage to lug it here if you're going to shoot something short a day or two.
Nigel?
Well, I clearly don't know LA as well as Courtney and maybe Alex do, but my experience is I'd have a really good sense of where you are going in LA and where you have to get to and from. LA is huge and it's sprawling and the road system can be very rough. So if you're going to one particular area, you're probably fine. But if you're planning a lot of travel, make sure you plan your travel, because it can take a long time, depending on the time of the day, to get from one place to another. And what looks pretty close to each other on a map from the other side of the world can take hours to get to.
Next question.
From Håkan Force in Sweden. Any NDI equivalent to a video router that duplicates the NDI signal at the router rather than at the source?
Jeff?
Yes, the Sienna processing engine is exactly what it can do. It doesn't have to do, but it can do that. And matter of fact, one of my friends is using that for disc golf. They're doing all the feeds coming into the router, into the processing engine, and then everything is being pulled off of the processing engine to go to multiple vMix systems to do their replay, to do their stage buildups for their remote talent, and then the final mix down through another system. So yes, the processing engine could be set up to reclock and retimestamp, and basically at that point, then the feed would actually be coming from the processing engine. The router itself, any of the routers that are out there currently right now, they do not. They are actually pulling from the source itself. So it's renaming and routing, but it's not actually resetting the NDI signal. The NDI signal is coming from the source. That can get you into trouble. So because you could overload, say, a Spark or even a Magewell, or especially bird dogs, whenever they can only support 1, 2, maybe 3 NDI full out sources from that one converter. But you see it on the network. It's like, oh, I'll take it. And you put it into 8 different multi-views. That means 8 different multi-views are trying to pull it from that device. And that's the danger that I'm sure he's trying to get away from. So yes, NDI processing engine would be the only answer that I know of right now. Or a Nimble server. I'll take that back. A Nimble server would be able to do processing also.
Next question.
From Tom Jordan in New York City. Tom asks, how much longer will broadcast journalists and on-air news anchors remain influential and relevant?
Nigel?
I don't know. To some extent, that time has passed already. I mean, the audience for some of those things is increasingly small, and particularly broadcast television is, I find, amongst people I know, people who've yet to jump on the over-the-top or IPTV answers. I think where this is interesting is, we used to hire these people to do events for us, to chair events, to, be the lead in an event, to make sure we had a professional doing the linking bits to make it smooth. And increasingly, these are not the people we are looking to do that because they don't bring the credibility. The upside is they become a lot cheaper than they used to be because they're not so much in demand. But I think those traditional models, I think late night entertainers are going the same way. And I suspect at some point they will make a decision to drop some of particularly the late night stuff. But they don't have the same influence. The traditional media networks don't. And they're not as useful, I find, when putting on events.
Alex?
Yeah, we definitely don't use them for influence. I think that the big thing that we miss when we use social influences is just the practice. The amount of reps that a broadcaster has done to get to somewhere has been they've done thousands of these, and I think so their ability to manage. So when we bring a moderator in, we have a handful of moderators that we recommend for a lot of our stuff because I just know that I have one that he flew an all-nighter. He shows up and he just does the show, and it's just as good as any other show he's ever done, and he just knocks it out. But I think that in general, that's what we're looking for out of broadcasters. We don't expect them to add any viewership to our shows anymore. Having a really high-end broadcaster is no guarantee that anyone's going to care on YouTube, to do that. But they do bring the ability. We one of our favorite jokes is we were doing a thing with Soledad O'Brien, and there was some kind of last-minute thing, and Shannon, Shannon ran over to say something, and she was kind of in a rush because there was 30 seconds before we went live, and Soledad had just looked at her and said, "Don't worry, honey, we got 30 seconds." It was like she's like, "We got this. I got this handled," and that's what you get with a broadcast moderator is someone who is unshakable, who can 30 seconds is an eternity, that they can do whatever they want. And we don't get that with social moderators generally. They're usually pretty frazzled because they're just, they haven't done it live that much, and so I think that's the big advantage. As far as journalists go, they're influential for a certain segment of the market that's watching broadcast TV. But as Nigel said, that market is shrinking very, very fast. I don't watch broadcast. I watch some of the. I watched this week was George Stephanopoulos, but I skipped straight to just the discussion. It's like 15 minutes, and that's all that's like my entire broadcast experience every week. And so I think that's going to be a challenge, and it's going to keep on shrinking. I don't think there's no recovery there in that sense.
Courtney?
Yeah, as far as news goes, I disdain the fact that people are getting their news from Facebook or from X or from former Twitter users or et cetera for social media, because you're not getting news, you're getting commentary or opinion of each of those individual each individual influencers, let's say. We used to have anchormen used to be known for their integrity, and journalists really are the ones who prepared the news, researched the news, rooted out the news, and prepared it, ran it through a news editor who would check it, verify it for sources, et cetera, verify that it was true before they handed that copy over to the anchor, and the anchor was in charge of looking authoritative and sounding authoritative. Remember, Walter Cronkite used to be the most trusted man in America at the time because he was a news anchor that people believed. And these days, as the news becomes stratified and people just get their news from the people that tell them the news that they want to hear, and the algorithm filters your sources of news to just those that are delivering what you want to hear, you don't get a really true coverage of what the actual news is. You get more of an opinion. And I kind of regret the fact that we've lost some of the trusted journalists out there. I still try and get my news from the three main networks if possible, and I bounce between all three because they can color the news sometimes. But usually I trust those more than any unfiltered source that you will find on the internet. These days with AI-generated voices, the trouble is, do you trust an AI-generated voice? Or do you want to know that Walter Cronkite is really talking to you? Or is it the ghost of Walter Cronkite through AI?
Nigel?
So I know we're about to head into dangerous territory here, so I will try and step lightly, and if I see waving, I will stop. I probably couldn't disagree more with Courtney on this if I tried. My advice is two things. One, never make anything the single element of your information, whether it's NBC, CBS, ABC, BBC, CNN, whatever it is. Never make one. They are all biased. I saw a great thing about New York Times the other day about what was happening to New York Times, and my observation to them was New York Times publishes what it can sell. If you believe any of these things are a tome of truth, you are in denial. So my advice is never pick one thing, triangulate, pick multiple sources, both sides, and get there. There was a very good mug debate last year about whether you can trust the mainstream media, and it was Matt Taibbi and Douglas Murray versus someone from the New York Times, I can't remember, and Gladwell. Gladwell made a bit of an idiot of himself. But I thought it was a really instructive debate in how you can't take anything binary anymore. They are definitely a source of information, but they need to be triangulated, the mainstream media, like anything else.
Alex, triangulate us.
While I don't watch a lot of journalism, I do read a lot. I mean, I listen a lot. I use a program called NOAA, which is news over audio, and I listen to it, I don't know, a couple hours a day. So when I wanted to correct myself to make sure, like when it comes to journalism, I actually absorb an enormous amount of data. And all that data is coming from a lot of different places. When we think about photogrammetry, this is always, to me, the best metaphor. So I have an object here like this, a very poorly drawn cube. And if I only look at it from one position, I can't get, your phone, every time it wants to do tracking, I always want you to move the phone around. It's because it wants another angle. Like it can't tell what's in front of it when it only has one angle. So the more you move your phone around, it suddenly locks into what the environment is because it needed other angles. And that's what we need when we talk about news. So what I'm listening to usually are things that are over here and things that are over here and things that might be over here. So that means that I don't want to know what Fox News believes or MSNBC or Al Jazeera. I want to see what all of them say. And what's funny is that all of these have their own inaccuracies. Where they agree, whatever they all agree on, is probably pretty close to the truth. They all have different opinions, and you'll find that it's really boring what they all agree on, because it'll be like, this person went to the White House, this person left the White House. They all agree on that. Everything else that they don't agree on is their opinion, and you want to be very careful of taking people's opinions, at face value. Any opinions, it's very, very dangerous. It has always been very dangerous. Do a research on the reason that I know I sound very cynical. This is not from me reading lots of the internet. This is from me being in hundreds, potentially thousands of events that have been reported on in the news. So I know what was there because I was there. And then I read about it by somebody, and there's a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that is, the Dunning-Kruger effect is that a novice will overthink that their skill, and an expert will underestimate their skill, because they know all the things they don't know. And the novice doesn't know, and so they think they know more than they do. Applied to journalism, it's that you have a tendency to read an article. Look at how many times someone writes an article and you read it and you go, that person has no idea what they're talking, like it's some area that you go, that person doesn't have any idea what they're talking about. And then you somehow assume that every other article in that magazine is somehow truthful. The journalists are not content experts. They are not there. They are not doing it. They have generally not done it. And they overestimate their opinions about why those things are. And I don't care whether it's conservative or liberal or anything else. So this isn't a political thing. This is just they are inaccurate when it comes off of their typewriter, when it comes out of their mouth. It is inaccurate. What I say when I'm reporting on it on its own is probably inaccurate. That's why this panel is so useful. It's because we don't all agree. You get, on many of the questions, you get multiple views of the same thing. And then you get to try to figure that out. That is part of why this panel works. is because we don't all agree on the same on these things, because Jeff and I will see things very differently most of the time. And Courtney will see it a different way, and Nigel will see it a different way, and Jeff will, both Jeffs will see it a different way, and Samuel will see it his own way. That variety is part of why this panel is triangulating something that is not the truth, but closer to it. And so the thing is that it's really, really important. This is a really important question, and it's really important. And that's what makes the internet so interesting, is that there's a lot of really bad information out there. There's a lot of errata, but you're also getting a lot of things that the mainstream press will just decide, well, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're going to do it, and that's not good news, or we're not sure if it floats, and a lot of things, and so I think that's what we have to be very careful of, is assuming that all of that's inaccurate. But when I read anything now, I go, well, I'm going to have to look at that in a couple different places before I get upset, before my blood starts to boil, before I think, something has to be done about this. I go, maybe I'll do some more research. Like, if I actually think I care, I drive that I care into research, not into I have to now tweet something, while I still can't feel my fingers because I'm so angry. That's a different, that's a I just kind of go, well, I need to figure out what happened, because there's a lot of things that I can tell you that you think are true. They are definitely not. And I know, because it's not because I know where the bodies are. It's because I still have the shovel. All right.
Ronnie?
Yeah, and I'm getting so fed up about all the cut and paste news that all the channels are just copying from each other. But I would be really scared if we are going to TikTok for classified or good news.
Yeah.
So that would be really scary. But in between, there is a balance probably. And one service I've started using the last 12 months is something called ground.news, which is kind of balancing all the articles between all these news outlets and giving a perspective on how they are, if they are right-wing or left-wing or in the middle. So ground.news is a kind of cool service.
Courtney?
Yeah, Nigel, I don't think we disagree as much as you think we do. I agree that a variety of sources is, like I said, I watch the three main networks, all three of them, to see how each one of them deals with individual stories. And, broadcast news has changed considerably since the invention of the internet. It used to be UPI and AP really generated the news, and most broadcasters, especially local broadcasters, just subscribe to one of those two news sources or Reuters, and they would rip that stuff off the teletype and read it. So there wasn't very much conjecture or anything, and you'd hear the exact same wording on a news story from channel to channel. These days, it's a lot different, and there used to be a line of demarcation between news and commentary, and they actually have to label on the news program. They do the news, and then they go, okay, now here's our commentary section, and it may be the same news anchor, and they may bring in, Eric Severite or somebody else to give their commentary on the news, to give their opinion. But nowadays, it's almost all commentary, and the movie Network is a good example of how basically news has been corrupted by the entertainment and by the fact that all of the big news organizations or media organizations have become part of super media conglomerates that are there to sell a product. And it's all about, rather than just bringing you a public service, the information that you want to hear, the news of the day, they're there to sell it to you, to carry advertisements and to sell. So whatever draws more attention hits the number one news story, et cetera, et cetera. So it's money drives everything these days.
Alex?
I will argue that the news has never worked. Like, we think that there was some time in the fact, Ben Franklin famously used his publication to attack his rivals. Alexander Hamilton was dragged through, a lot of drama because of people who didn't agree with him. This happened all the way back, and so the thing is that how things are said have been, used and manipulated. If you look at news articles from around the Civil War, around the other thing, all those things have been, in those areas. Even if you look at World War II or World War I, the amount of propaganda that it gets pushed into it, there's never been a time when this really worked. it's always, and before we didn't have all those sources of information. We had to just, what does our local paper say? And now we're not limited to that anymore. So I think that that's something to, kind of take into account as we look at it. And again, I think what we're dealing with now is an overload, and any old person can get an enormous get out in front of a lot of people. And that's why we have to not trust what we see, especially as AI starts to pick up as those things. But it is important that there are news things that are coming out, and once we can see them, and I think it's really important to understand more than anything else that almost everything we see is more complicated than it looks. There's this whole idea that it's just simple. Like we could just fix this thing, or we could just fix this thing if we just did this. Rarely is that the case. That you could just do something simple and it would just make everything better. Usually there's a very, very complex thing. And I think that we need to understand as viewers that there isn't anything. There is no simple fix. There is no simple way to do things. Everything is complicated and everything is difficult if it truly is at scale. And anybody telling you on the news that it isn't is lying. The other thing I will say is there's news, but what you have to understand is it's how you tell the news. Like, as someone who listens to lots of journalism, by the words that you use to tell me about something, I know where you stand. Like, I know where you stand as the person writing just by the words. Like if you say, if you say you're pro something or anti something or whatever, and the way you phrase that, I can immediately identify that journalist as, and I will listen to them. I won't stop listening to them, but I will listen to them through that filter. This person is this way. This person is that way. And it's almost impossible to get out of those, those things that you do there. So you just have to be, very sensitive to the fact that it's never really worked. And now we just have more data and people are overwhelmed by it. And it's important for us to keep on reminding people to keep on being able to dig through the stuff and figure it out themselves.
Next question.
From Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia. Alex asks, do generative art AI services allow for commercial use of work created by it?
Alex?
Currently people are using it. Larger organizations are standing a little bit back because there's still a lot of lawsuits that are flying around related to it. Although it doesn't really look like they will be accountable for that unless they're misusing a brand or something like that. You have to be careful of brands and likenesses. But if you're putting out AI, a lot of people are starting to play with it. The big thing is you can use it for commercial use, but you probably can't copyright it. So you can't say you own it, but you can say you can still use it. You can throw it out there in front of people as long as you don't care, whether somebody else takes it and runs off with it. I posted a Santa Claus, one of my little Santa Claus things with Santa Claus behind a camera and everything else. And I posted that on Twitter, and someone sent it to me in Discord that said, hey, someone else is using it in their Facebook. There's like a video editing or a video group in Facebook that grabbed my Santa Claus image and that I made in Midjourney and put it, and they didn't reference me. They just took my image and stuck it in their thing and said it's kind of a Merry Christmas thing. And you know what I could do about it? Absolutely nothing. Just like so I couldn't do anything about it. And I was fine. I was like, they all had a good time with it. So it took me 20 seconds to make that thing. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But that's what you have to be aware of. And once you put that image out, now if you put stuff over top of it and you copyright it, that's one thing. But if it's mostly just an image, you're probably not going to be able to protect it.
Courtney?
Yeah, Alex is right. You probably can't copyright it or own it in any. It's basically like putting it into public domain. And these days, also Google and Microsoft do have agreed to indemnify you and protect you if you get sued for some reason by creating something using their generative AI to create something that somebody takes offense of or tries to claim as their property, and they sue you, Microsoft, or depending upon whose engine you use to create it, Microsoft or Google may defend you in that case. So that's brings a little bit of peace of mind. But Alex said, as others have said, using a logo that is trademarked can get you into trouble. So just be careful that it doesn't. And a lot of these engines are trained to specifically have filters in them to avoid known logos and trademarked items so that they mess them up a little bit. That's I think one of the reasons a lot of the text amongst other reasons. That a lot of the text in Midjourney doesn't read like anything correct. It's hard to reproduce text accurately.
It's now working, by the way, in 6.
Yeah, I know. So does also Copilot generates text pretty accurately, but occasionally in the background you'll see it's still making up letters that aren't real letters.
TJ?
The company I work for has laid out very specific guidelines prohibiting the use of any generative AI images or text in anything that will be trademarked, copyright, or patented.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'll jump right onto what TJ is saying. I agree with that. I've watched people create campaigns for products, and while they'll use Midjourney or something similar to kind of sketch out an idea or come up with an idea, when it comes time to actually producing the thing that you're going to get out on the air to people or something like that, it's remade from the ground up, and nothing but the sort of the look or the idea or the feel that they were kind of searching through to get to turn that into an actual thing got used, not the elements that came right out of the AI assistant.
It's almost like it's a reverse. Before we were, how can we take an image that has a copyright applied to it and parody or modify it enough so that we can use it for fair use? Now we're trying to take something that's not copyrightable and modify it enough so we can copyright it. We've turned the whole paradigm on its head. Next question.
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Guy says, from a remote location, how would you use Starlink as a primary connection for a live stream? Do you need multiple to avoid dropouts? Jeff?
I think I would say it depends, because it depends on if you're getting paid to do it or if it's just for fun. If you're getting paid to do it, I would definitely use 2. And I would go into something that's doing bonding like a live view, like we did for that little rocket launch thing we did with John Bretto. That was 2 different live views, or I'm sorry, 2 different Starlinks that were fed into the live view. In the past that we've done this again, that was exactly the same thing we did, because it worked that way better. It bonded the bandwidth. It gives you a higher bandwidth, but we weren't really pushing the limits of any single one connection. But because of the way the satellites move in the sequences that they do across and what your visibility of those satellites are, in the past, having 2 and having them somewhat offset it. So when you start a Starlink, it goes up and it points and tries to find the best angles, and then it will follow it will move and try to follow around the satellites as they're moving across. It's not as particular as like the old days with the KUs or KAs, but it does have a bit of movement in it. Now that they've kind of, I guess you would say, opened the floodgates and allowed us to use them in motion, it's not so. Then there's more satellites up there. I think that you could probably get away with maybe 1, but I would still go with 2. Best bet was what we did, is basically using the live view cellular and also the Starlinks all together. But it depends on how remote you are. When we were on the side of the mountain at Pikes Peak, we didn't have a choice. So cellular didn't matter. It didn't exist. So we had to use the testing that we were doing was 2 Starlinks at that point in time.
Alex?
Yeah, I think for commercial work, I agree with Jeff. You have to bond 2 of them together. I can tell you, as someone who owns a Starlink, as one of them, I have never had a continuous time long enough to run a full-length live stream where I haven't lost connectivity with one. So it may be a short connectivity problem, but 20 seconds in the middle of a show is a lot of meetings later. So you would need to bond them, not just have it fail over, but bond between the 2 of them to make sure that it's jumping as needed.
Ronnie?
I'm pretty sure Guy is knowing a lot of this already. But what we have used instead of Starlinks and other stuff, especially since Norway was a long time comer for the Starlink system, we use air fiber from Ubiquiti to shoot really long distance links to a position where we can actually have a cabled network or a fiber.
Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III from Oklahoma City wants to know, switching to AWS Elemental Links seems to be a great way to offload processing power and helps in stabilizing a stream. But what other costs are involved? For example, what would be the real-world monthly cost to be streamed 30 hours of 1080 60p video?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I'll just add to the question. We are looking into doing this ourselves, and I know that AWS has different calculators both for Elemental Media Live and the Media Encoder. So I would like to ask, can we have an example of a practical example on how this is priced and how we are supposed to be using these calculators to get a kind of 10,000 feet overview over the cost to this?
Alex?
Yeah, there's the link has its own cost, which is pretty nominal. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's pretty small. And the egress is usually between 75 cents and $1, to get out for one output on these. Usually my rule of thumb is about $1.50 a minute. I'm sorry, $1.50 an hour. About $1.50 an hour, not a minute, but $1.50 an hour. And I usually calculate, I round that up because I feel like I'm going to turn it on for a while longer and everything else. So I'm thinking like $2 an hour for one egress. Again, that's how I calculate it in my head. It's just like, oh, it's $2 an hour, and I know that it'll come in under that. I don't try to be. I find when making these kind of calculations that precision is not your friend, because you'll be tempted to quote things against precision. And what I tend to do is just, think of it more like a grenade. Like I just got to cover that room. So I tend to be I tend to overestimate all the costs related to things. But for each egress, if you calculate $2 an hour, I think you're pretty safe.
Jeff?
And that's, by the way, I just want to say that's at 1080p, because it will be more expensive if you do 4K.
Yeah, more bandwidth, more costs. Absolutely. To those people that want to do 4K. Looking at you, Alex. What about though? Are you thinking $2 an hour for every stream? Are you just talking about egress into the CDN?
Every stream that I put out. So if I did HLS, I would calculate. The way I would think about it would be every step of the ladder would be $2 an hour. That's how I would calculate it. I would be surprised at how low it is when it comes out the other end if I actually calculated it that way. But I just keep it in my head. It's $2 an hour, and then it tends to be less than that. It tends to be like $1.35 or $1.50 an hour or something like that, with all the things included. And the link does have a little bit of an extra. There's an ingress cost as well as an egress cost. There's a link management cost and everything else, and then there's the pieces there. But I think I think the true number is about $1.50 an hour. We'll try to look at it. I'm happy to open up and show what office hours spends on it, because we're not using links right now, so that's the problem. But I can. But when I calculate it in my head, I just think $2 an hour, and then I'm not surprised with the bill later.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois wants to know, is there a relatively good but cheap way to convert fiber to Ethernet? I'm trying to slowly upgrade my home studio.
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I know a lot of people like the TP-Link solutions. I have to tell you that I redid all of my network at home recently and went to the Netgear M4250s as a proper architecture, and they have SPF Plus connections that will probably take fiber. But I always think with networking, design the whole network first and then buy it in places, because if you build it as you go along, it's hard to make it all work.
Jeff?
Congratulations, Nigel. Yeah, the M4250s are amazing. We use those in our production, we're use them in our offices also. But I would strongly ask the question, Kyle, is why? If you were only going 10 feet, 30 feet, even 100 feet for that matter, is there really a reason to go fiber? If you're trying to make it thousands of feet like we do in the field, that's different for sure. Or if you need more bandwidth or have cable that's already buried that you don't want to have to rerun, that's the bigger question I think you should ask. Is the reason why. Just to do it, just for fun, sure, why not? But converters are not going to be the most efficient way to do that. You're adding another part in the chain that could possibly fail due to power. But an SFP or SFP Plus, as Nigel says, you can get the 10 gig out of that or more. So go with that route if you need more backbone bandwidth between switches, or devices for that matter. But big question would be like reason why. I guess.
Ronnie?
Yeah, and I have the same question. I don't think I understand the question. Is this just for video feeds, or is it like for Ethernet or network in general? Just clarify that, Kyle. It would be great for me to understand what you actually mean.
Next question.
From Ronnie Hofse from Tromsø, Norway. Most office hours panelists display impressive shelves and backgrounds brimming with relevant gadgets. Which shelving options are preferred? Custom built, IKEA, or utilizing what's on hand, probably excluding those needing a forklift?
Alex?
There's I'm using Uline, and the reason it doesn't look like a Uline behind it is because I put gaffer tape across the horizontal one, just black gaffer tape, just because it's out of focus, you don't notice it. I just didn't like the zigzag that you could see in the thing. And I also this is a piece of wood that I just literally, you can kind of see the Uline right there. It kind of fell over a little bit because I tripped over it before this morning. But I usually just lay it up there, so it just creates it. So it's really just Uline stuff. You can get cheaper versions of Uline on Amazon for a lot less money. The problem with them is the build quality is much lower and they're harder to put together. That's what I have in my garage. There are so many options when you go up to Amazon of finding them. Here's a couple things that I think about in that area. In my view space, how far back is it and how high does it have to go? In this case, I know that at the very back behind this, I need it to be about 60 inches. So the top part has to be 60 inches high. So I know that my shelving, and you'd be surprised at how many of those shelves are not 60 inches high. They look like it, so you have to be very careful. But so I'm looking typically for 72-inch shelves, 68 to 72-inch shelves if I'm going to put them back there. I had some other ones that I was testing. My son took them. The other thing to think about is how wide you need them. So for instance, the camera that I have here, that I put here, needs it to be 24-inch wide, on those things. And then it also has to be 14 inches high to fit a lot of the things that I have in there. So you want to kind of think about what are the items that I'm putting in there when you start thinking about what those are. So those are some of the calculations that you want to think about. One thing that I am, playing with is building something that's a little bit more of a jigsaw with MakerPipe. So building that out, it turns out it's a lot of MakerPipe fittings, which turns out to be more expensive than just buying the shelves, to put it together. I went down this MakerPipe path because that's what I use for my rigs here. But I found that it was getting pretty expensive to do that. What I am also thinking about, just because I like a real gritty kind of, country kind of look, is pipe, just plumbing, where there's a lot of like shelves. And so I've been researching getting like thick 2-inch wood that's, either stained or not stained. I don't have to be super nice, but I want to round. I know this will sound crazy, but I want to make sure that I bevel around the top edge of that wood, because I know that that'll catch highlights on my lights here. And so it'll create a little bit of an element there that you can see. So you're thinking about a lot of it as you do it. I've been thinking about like when it's out of focus, what does it look like? Because that's all that matters. Like I put some, both CJ and I have brick behind, these are just sheets of brick that we put back there. And it allowed me to get rid of those windows that were kind of a lighting nightmare. But also just create a little bit more contrast because I had kind of a lighter background, so the gear sticks out a little bit more. So those are some of the thought processes that I think about. It's a funny question because I think about it a lot, and I'm constantly kind of evolving it. Another thing that we're starting to play with is lights, little lights, which don't work. I don't think mine work right now, but you kind of think about it, and that's mostly because we're thinking about HDR, and I look at stuff like Alex Knight's layout is really good because it's got all these great lights. You can see Samuel's got some, and those kinds of framing with lights as we move towards HDR, those look amazing, when they're stretched out. So that's another thing that I kind of keep in mind.
Ronnie?
Yeah, one of the reasons for asking this is, of course, I'm going to clean up my flat gray colored background. And I was looking into the IKEA, what's it called? Omar, which is the thing that you see in all the film scenes with the kind of modular chrome, blank metal kind of thing, often seen in kitchens. But I was thinking, and this is regard to HDR, could the chrome thing be reflecting too much, or have you thought of that?
Chrome's hard to control. I mean, that's why I don't have a lot of chrome. Like it's hard to control, and you get a lot of highlights and weird highlights and so on and so forth. So I'm putting lights back there to put the HDR quote unquote effect in the places that I want to, but I wouldn't use Chrome as again, I have these are Chrome behind me, but I fix them by putting gaff tape over the front of just over the front lip,
And Alex, I thought that was just queenship PTSD, was the Chrome avoidance.
No, I love Chrome as a general thing. I have lots of Chrome things because of my experience with the queenship. I have little Chrome, lots of Chrome stuff, but I don't like putting it behind me because I know how hard it is to light, because I had to light one for a year and a half.
Go ahead, TJ.
How about a little love for the simple backdrop? Behind this backdrop is actually a wall of IKEA Billy bookcases. Spans the whole wall. Just for those who aren't aware, Billy bookcases, I have, I think, 9 or 10 in the house now. They're incredibly well made and durable. The one that's behind me has been here for close to 20 years now.
Go ahead, Samuel.
What I have behind me here, I have a TV, and then I have some lights in front of me here, and then I have these are little shelves with with wheels on. So it's I think it's IKEA. So what I have like the little shelf here with wheels on, and then the ones over here, and I have the TV in front of it. Then I feed SRT feed to the TV.
And go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I find that anything with a horizontal surface turns into a shelf in my living room, and that's why I have a 100-year-old shelf back there that's a diamond disc player from Mr. Edison, and on the other side, I think I have a 45 or 40-year-old JBL studio monitor speaker, which there's a pair of back there that are my background surround speakers. So they work good as a shelf too, because they're wood, they're heavy, they're hard to move, they hold up a lot.
Next question.
From Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Guy says, if there was one piece of gear to buy that would assuredly get you work, what would that be?
Alex?
A lot of times you have to look at what is coming around the corner. I've done this a couple times, and it's not one piece of gear. It is looking for the front, the front edge of a wave coming in. And so, in one case, I bought this camera. Actually, this camera here with its kit and its lens, used, cost $82,000, and I paid it off in a year because I was the only person. This is why I did it. I was the only person that had a 444 camera in Northern California. So people rented it, people brought us work, people had us do shows, and it actually launched all of the production that I did for a few years. It was just the fact that I owned that camera. Now, key is I didn't just buy that camera. I did videos of how we were doing. So the road to 1080p, which is still the most viewed Mac break ever. It was, I think it crested at nearly 1 million views. That video is what generated all the work. So not owning the camera didn't generate the work. It was the video and the fact that I owned the camera. But it didn't look like a commercial. I didn't put something out going, hey, I didn't put something on LinkedIn going, I feel really great that these people worked with me on this last job, and really thank you so much, and look at the camera that I have. I didn't do any of that. It was a matter of fact content. Here's how we're doing this. Look, we got this thing, and here's what, and you'll see me sketch out. Here's the difference between 444 and 422. So I educated the viewers on why that camera made a difference, but it was all inside of just a matter of fact video. I educated people. I showed what we were doing for free because we were doing a free thing. It was Mac Break. I mean, we were just doing this thing for ourselves. But I explained all the things by educating my consumer. They now couldn't look at 422 the same way. I just poisoned their mind. So they, once they understood what the difference is, and once they knew what to look for, they couldn't unsee the little stair steps on their keys. And so that's part of the puzzle. And the other time that I did that was with the Ozos. We bought these Ozos, and there's another Ozo somewhere. There it is right there. And I spent a lot of money on those. The first two Ozos I got were $60,000 each, and then the next two were No, the first one was 60,000. The next two were 30,000. The last three were 7,000 each. Anyway, so, but again, we did tons of training. We talked a lot about spherical video, and they all paid themselves off, and plus some, in work, so I think that you have to look at what those are, and sometimes those are waves. There was a time but for a solid, this camera worked hard for a solid 5 years and generated, and not just rentals. It did generate a lot of rentals, but it also generated. We got work with Adobe, Salesforce, PBS, like all these Panic at the Disco. so anyway, like all these, by the way, playing drums right next to an architectural firm in the middle of the day is not a great way to make friends with your neighbors. And so anyway, so all of that stuff was generated though from that video, and then the work that kind of ran from that video as it went out. So.
Courtney?
Well, if you have really deep pockets, I'd suggest, getting one of these Sony Crystal LED BH or CH series video walls and an Unreal Engine setup and camera tracking to make a little portable virtual studio that you could travel around with or put on a small stage. That would get you some work. Another thing, there's a lot of people that make a lot of money off of techno cranes, which is a telescoping crane in a 40 or 50-foot length that works a lot of concerts, a lot of live events. You can keep that thing booked pretty regularly, and a crew of 2 or 3 and a trailer to transport it around in, or a fifth wheel to transport it around in. That would get you a lot of work too, because they're usually in demand, and they're always very few people own them as part of their regular cadre of equipment. They usually rent them because they're kind of expensive.
Alex?
Airy Trinity is pretty good. You saw my brother show it to you. There's like, I don't know how many. I was asking somebody, not my brother, but I was asking somebody else. I was like, how many Trinities are in the United States? And he's like, I think about 30. so like, there's like, and they said might be 20. So there's not that many Trinity rigs out there. But again, if you want to have something that gets you work, you do that. And you're still, you still have to figure out how you're going to get the volume to make that actually happen. And so it's a marketing, puzzle, as well as don't just buy something and think people are going to start calling you about it. How are you going to let people know? And one of the ways to do it, and the way I've always done it, is we do a bunch of stuff for ourselves. That's why we do our own podcast. That's why we do our own, those types of things. And we do it for nonprofits and other people. We just tell people, hey, I'm willing to help you do something because I'm trying to figure this out. That gets you in a lot of doors, and it lets you figure it out as well. So you get good at it, you get to use it, but you're also, you have a demo reel that you're kind of building up. A lot of people make the mistake of buying something and then they sit on it because they didn't do the things that are required. You want it to work. Working at the beginning, it will work for nothing, and then eventually it'll work for a lot of money. But you're worth whatever you got paid on the last job. And if there is no last job, then get out there, get it going.
Next question.
Steve, you're off in Madison, Wisconsin. Is there a vendor that can digitize, upscale, and denoise VH home videos better than the competing services?
Alex?
I wouldn't use a vendor to do that at this point. So if you're patient and you're willing to do it, what you want to do is get a vendor that can digitize your VHS. Don't try to get them all to do all of it at one time. Get someone who can get the timing right on the VHS to make sure that it is exactly the best copy of the VHS that you can get. That's what you want them to do. You want someone who specializes they have lots of VHSs, they have professional VHS. They can sit there and make fine adjustments to get just the right video out. Once they get it out, the scaling and denoising is Topaz. Topaz AI is the way you're going to do that. It's the way that they're going to do it. So if you hand it to them, it's a $300 app or a $500 app. I work with some pretty big companies, and they're all using Topaz to do this. Changing the frame rate, changing there's a couple other really expensive services that'll do that, but the people who are doing the VHS digitization do not use the services that are really, really high end that do this. And I got to tell you, I've done a lot of Topaz work, and it's impressive. It's very slow. The last one I did for an hour and a half took 71 hours to do. So that was, it doesn't, you got to be patient, but it will do a great job if you give it some time.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois. Is there a way to lock a YouTube video on your phone? I keep accidentally hitting stop or skipping to the next video when I put office hours in my pocket. Podcast version can't come soon enough.
Harshid?
I'm a little confused. Well, if you're using premium, you could lock your screen and it should continue to still play. So I'm not sure if you're using premium. That's one element to check out to have YouTube Premium. That way, anything I play personally, I just lock my screen, I throw it in my pocket, so at least I get to hear the audio.
Courtney?
Yeah, I agree with Harshid. Just hit, if you sometimes have to enable something called playing in background on the app. And if once that is checked, then you can just hit the lock button on your screen goes black and turns off the touch interface, and you can stick it in your pocket and it'll continue to play your media through your headphones or wireless connection.
Alex?
And if you have if you have an iPhone, the radio app works really well. It doesn't require, you can turn it off the front screen. It works fine. I will say, for those of you on the fence about the premium, I don't even know how someone uses YouTube without premium. Like, I don't even know how, like, it is absurdly bad. Like, YouTube without premium is absurdly bad. Like, just try the trial. They're not giving me any money to tell you this, but just try the trial for a month. You'll never go back. Like, my credit card changes, I just changed, and suddenly I had it for like a couple days. I was like, what happened to YouTube? And then I realized, I got to go fix my credit card, and then I was back to normal. But it's unwatchable, like, in my opinion, without all those ads. It just takes all the fun out of it.
Harshid?
I would also suggest try to go for the premium. I mean, it'll be around $25, but if you have a couple friends, everyone could chip in $5. It's cheaper than paying the $11.99 for a single user. And if you need to test stuff and have a couple accounts, you could always have a couple YouTube accounts and flip back and forth. So one could be just all news and one could be all fun stuff. So you could separate it out that way and have fun with it.
Courtney?
And if you live in the Android world rather than the walled garden, I always recommend SmartTube Next. It gives you all the advances plus more than the premium account for YouTube. No commercials. Not only does it skip over commercials, it'll skip over regular intros. It'll skip over self-promotional things like, don't forget to hit that, smash that bell, and subscribe to. It'll skip over those, and it'll tell you what it skipped over. It has every kind of granular control. You can control what it skips over and what it filters out.
And Courtney, that'll play in the background too?
I believe it will, yes. Use that to play in the background many times.
Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York asks, anyone have a DVC Pro deck I can borrow? Looking to digitize the last cruise of the Battleship New Jersey and donate it.
Jeff?
Yes, I do. DVC Pro, DV Cam, Beta, shelves and shelves of decks. Wasting away. But yeah, reach out to me, Henry. We could work out something, I'm sure.
Next question.
DJ Ash in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that's me. Can Alex recommend a specific brand or model of travel iron?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the last one that I bought was this one I'm pretty happy with. This is the Rowenta Pro Compact Stainless Steel Soul Plate Steam Iron. It's $40. The handle opens up. It holds a bunch of stuff. It's a little bit more expensive than some of the other ones, and it works great.
I'm so happy that you said that. I was like, TJ's like, I don't know if this is a good question. I said, no, that is the question. I was going to say, if you're going to buy an iron, buy the Rowenta iron. Spend the money. It's worth it. It's as good as a steamer with how intense the output of this thing is. There will be a full-size iron that's about $60 and another full-size iron that's about $140. The difference is made in China versus made in Germany. The German-made Rowenta is a tank. I used to travel with it. Like, I drove 65,000 miles a year, and I took the Rowenta to every single trip. TJ?
I actually have a Rowenta full-size regular iron, so that's good.
All right, next question.
All of my irons are Rowenta, just by the not that I'm specific about irons. Like, we're at the end of the hour on a Saturday, but the Rowenta irons are the best.
Next question.
From Hasmut Gujar in Cape Town, South Africa. Discord. Need to clear users from Discord. There is no delete option. Should one block, kick, or ban to achieve deletion of a user?
Alex?
I think it's kick. I think you can kick people out if they're not. I think that's the process there, or ban. I wouldn't ban them unless you really don't want them to come back. But you can kick them out. A lot of times if we'll give people warnings, like we say, you got to use a real name, and then people will jump in, and every once in a while we just go through, and anybody who hasn't done it for X amount of time, we just kick them out. Just push them out of the system. So the other thing to think about is, as you build your Discord channel, is to create the ability to see everything, or that you have all these roles, and make sure you don't give people a role when they come in immediately. There's a role that is you don't get to do anything or see much, past the announcements that tell them what to do, and that's the base state. And then you have then the role of a member or whatever is an additional role, and that's what we have in our system. Additional role to kind of get in and do stuff. You can always just take that role away. You don't even have to do anything else. You just take the role away, and then they're kind of out of the system.
Go ahead, TJ.
Chad, who is one of our major Discord moderators, in the chat posted Kick. That's what he uses.
All right, Kick it is. Well, that kicks this Saturday show all together. I appreciate everybody being here. This was a lot of fun. Awesome panel. Thank you guys for coming in. It was great I know, Jeff, I haven't seen you on a Saturday in a while, and you're so darn smart. It's great to have everybody. Also, special thanks to the crew on the back end, the small village that woke up to make this show possible today. Folks are cutting the show, making sure we sound good, making sure that everybody's ushered into the room okay. And most importantly, to our audience, you guys, without your questions, there's no way that we could have a show. And even when I think I'm going to run out of time, man, more questions show up, and it's just so much fun. Just a reminder, starting right now is a new panelist meeting, so look out for a link in Discord for that. And then for our Tlaloc traversal today, we've got 90,000 miles. That's 143,000 kilometers, which is 706 million bananas for scale. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in after hours.
I'm off. I'll see you. Anybody wants to be new panel?
What iron did you use? What's the model of the iron?
Rowenta.
Yeah,
the Rowenta DA1560 for the travel iron.
And watch, Amazon's going to be out of all of those in about an hour.
The office hours, aren't they? Courtney, I'm mad as heck, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Yeah, go to your window.
Made me smile.
And shout at the top of your lungs. Stella the awesome. Soothsayer. Yeah, it was a great movie.
Great movie. I taught a broadcast video 101 class at Roosevelt University, and we watched that as part of like the first week, trying to ease into the semester.
It's a very insightful film.
And I might look at a